Good evening, I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, December 20th. We begin the cast with the first phase of a nationwide ban on single-use plastics, which took effect today. As of this morning, companies can no longer produce or bring into Canada certain plastic items. This includes plastic grocery bags, straws, cutlery, stir sticks, and takeout containers. In a year, it will also be illegal to sell them. The manufacturing and import ban will also extend to plastic rings that are used to package 6-packs of canned drinks next June. Turning to southern BC now, which is dealing with winter weather causing travel chaos. Vancouver International Airport says it is dealing with mass flight cancellations, and it's working to deplane passengers safely and deliver luggage to them in the terminal. Metro Vancouver has been hit with up to 25 centimeters of snow. This is forcing the airport to temporarily suspend all incoming and outgoing flights early this morning. Snow, extreme cold, and Arctic outflow warnings are in effect in the province. The blast of winter weather has forced BC ferries to cancel all morning sailings because of poor visibility. Well, the latest updates of a mass shooting in a condo north of Toronto reveal more details on the fatalities. 3 members of a condo board were among the 5 people killed in Sunday night's shooting in a high-rise in Vaughan. Police say the 73-year-old shooter had a long history of threatening members of the board and believe they had a conspiracy to systematically murder him. The man was due back in court yesterday as the board tried to have a judge find him in contempt for violating a previous order not to contact it, to stop threatening its members and building staff, and to cease posting about them on social media. Well, it looks like Canada is sanctioning Haiti's justice and interior ministers, claiming they are guilty of significant corruption that is fueling a crisis in the country. Ottawa accuses both officials of helping violent gangs. It's barring them from entering Canada and ordering any assets they hold in Canada to be frozen. Many of the 13 political and economic elites in Haiti that Canada has sanctioned have ties to Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who is pushing for an international military intervention to restore order. Onion Lake Cree Nation has filed a lawsuit against the Alberta government over its Sovereignty Act. The statement of claim says the act negates the guarantees of livelihood and freedom, which Treaty 6 was made to protect. The legislation is Premier Danielle Smith's marquee policy aimed at asserting Alberta's rights within Canada. Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children doesn't believe any personal health information has been compromised in a cybersecurity incident that it detected on Sunday night. But it says the system failure is affecting some of its phone lines, web pages, and clinical systems. All patient care is continuing, and Sick Kids says it has notified its partners and contacted third parties to resolve the issue. Powered by higher sales at gas stations and food and beverage stores, it looks like retail sales in Canada jumped 1.4% in October. Now, that's the biggest increase in 5 months, but it may be a blip and not a trend. Statistics Canada says its preliminary estimate points to a 0.5% drop in retail sales for November. The Prime Minister has appointed the first Black justice to sit in any appellate court in Canada as the new Chief Justice of Ontario. Michael Tulloch was admitted to the bar in 1991 and appointed a judge of the Superior Court of Justice for Ontario in 2003. He became the first Black justice to sit on a Canadian appellate court in 2012. This was when he was elevated to the Ontario Court of Appeal. The Big 5 Canadian banks are among many companies that are offering or boosting coverage for fertility treatments for their workers. Experts say they're filling a void because the healthcare system provides just limited coverage in most parts of the country for people trying to have a baby. Starting next month, the Bank of Montreal will increase the lifetime maximum for fertility drugs from $15,000 to $20,000. It will also reimburse $20,000 each for fertility treatment and surrogacy expenses. The Public Health Agency of Canada says about 1 in 6 couples experience infertility. Print and broadcast editors have chosen Freedom Convoy protesters as the Canadian Press Newsmaker of the Year. They based their choice on the effect that protesters had on life in general and the lasting impact that protests had on Canadian politics. 49% of the 104 survey respondents voted for the protesters to be Newsmaker of the Year. This is ahead of the 28% for the Queen, who died in September. All right, stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at veteran homelessness in Canada. That and more news from around the world coming up next, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Social agencies and advocates say that rising interest rates and high inflation are pushing more Canadians into homelessness. This comes as food bank use is also on the rise across the country. Amid this, one organization is advocating for Canadians to help those who once served this country. According to the Homes for Heroes Foundation, veterans are twice as likely as non-veterans to experience homelessness. It also says that female veterans are twice as likely as their male counterparts to be homeless. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this and how Canadians can help veterans this holiday season is Mr. David Howard, co-founder and CEO of the Homes for Heroes Foundation. Mr. Howard, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
So some very eye-opening figures on your website, Mr. Howard. Tell us a little bit more about the current state of homelessness among veterans in Canada.
Well, it's getting worse, I have to tell you that. About 5 years ago, the Senate put out a report about 5,000 veterans experiencing homelessness. We think those numbers are more in line with 10 to 15,000 across Canada. The difficult thing is that veterans don't self-identify, and they're doing these counts in shelters. So veterans aren't standing up and say, yes, I'm a veteran, and they're proud individuals that served our country, and they're looking for a hand up here. They're not looking for that handout.
It's saddening to hear that it's getting worse. Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the facts on your website. Why were veterans found to be twice as likely to fall into homelessness compared to non-veterans? What are some of the unique experiences and inequalities they may be facing in Canada right now?
Well, a lot of our tenants and what we're seeing in our veteran villages is we have a lot of vets that are suffering with post-traumatic stress. And that's one of the main reasons that we built the Homes for Heroes program, is so they could enter a healing program with a community of peers. There's also issues in regards to that reintegration as far as savings, getting moving forward in regards to further educating themselves, and a difficult time when that transition and taking the skills they've learned within the military, putting that into a resume that's going to express the hard work that they did serving Canada.
And on top of that, what's interesting is that female veterans were found to be even more at risk. So why is that?
Well, they're suffering some of the same issues that our men are, but at the same time, there's a lot of our men, or sorry, my apologies, our women that have been sexually assaulted during their service. And that has led them to early release, not being able to save enough when they exit the military, and then finding themselves in the street. And what's happening with the economy is making it worse for both men and women.
Indeed. Now, just about 2 minutes left here, sir, but what are some of the current supports out there for veterans that are experiencing homelessness in Canada right now?
Well, Homes for Heroes builds tiny home villages for our vets experiencing homelessness. There are some other localized programs. That Multi-Faith Housing is doing one, and there's one in Mission, the old Mission Brewery in Montreal. Those are really the only ones that are happening. We're the only organization that is building across Canada, and our goal is to end the issue of veteran homelessness.
All right, sir. So tell us a little bit more about Homes for Heroes and how it's tackling veteran homelessness across the country.
Well, we're building these tiny home villages with wraparound social support. So the key here is the vet that enters the program is entering a program, and they're committing to the program, and working with our on-site social workers to change the circumstances that left them to the streets. And then the idea is for them to get back on their feet, start working again if they can, and move out into more permanent housing and make room for our next tenant. So a program that was built by research I did with veterans and built for veterans.
All right, just about a minute left here, but how can our Canadian viewers give back to veterans this holiday season?
Well, certainly there's donations are welcome to Homes for Heroes, and there's other veteran-focused charities out there. Canadian Legacy Project does amazing work across Canada. Wounded Warriors is another program. Can Praxis is an equine therapy program that has shown some incredible results for post-traumatic stress. Helmets to hard hats is another. But truly, if you can volunteer with veteran organizations, and if you don't have the time and you don't have the funds right now, and it's money's tight across Canada, we appreciate it. A simple thank you to a veteran that has served. Thank them for their service, their dedication to sign and stand our guard for our country goes a long way.
A simple thank you can go a long way. All right, Mr. Howard, thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for your interest.
Stay with us. We're going to be right back. And after the break, we're going to take a look at a report that's highlighting the major tax changes that are expected for next year. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation will be joining us next after a short break, so stay tuned. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has released its annual New Year's Tax Changes report, which highlights the major tax changes for the upcoming new year. CTF is outlining the expected tax increases by the federal and provincial government in 2023. The report covers a range of changes from CPP contributions to carbon pricing to provincial taxes. And with inflation, interest rates, and supply chain concerns continuing to impact Canadians, many households may be interested in any changes to the taxes that they pay. Well, with us now to discuss the 2023 edition of the CTF's New Year's Tax Changes report is Mr. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
So from the looks of it, Canadians are in for multiple new tax increases, Mr. Terrazzano. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they can expect next year?
Unfortunately, Canadians are already struggling to afford groceries and gasoline. You have interest rates that are on the rise. But also, the federal government is going to be raising 5 taxes in 2023. The CPP tax is going up. The EI tax is going up. The carbon tax is going up. Alcohol taxes, well, you guessed it, also going up. And the federal government is also imposing a second carbon tax next year through fuel regulations.
Sounds like a lot to expect, Mr. Terrazzano. Now, this report also mentions bracket creep, which occurs when governments don't adjust their tax brackets with inflation. So tell us a little bit more about this and how apparent this is across Canada.
The good news is that most provinces and the federal government do not have bracket creep because they do move brackets with inflation. But unfortunately, you have provinces like Nova Scotia, like Prince Edward Island, that have bracket creep. And with inflation so high, this bracket creep income tax is going to really sting for those taxpayers. So, for example, in Nova Scotia, bracket creep could cost up to $653 in 2023. In Prince Edward Island, bracket creep could cost up to $263 in 2023.
All right, sir. And I want to jump into some of these other tax increases expected across the country, including carbon pricing. We know the CTF has been very vocal around carbon pricing. What's the situation next year when it comes to this?
Well, come April 1, 2023, the carbon tax is going up. Higher gas prices, higher home heating bills. Now, some of Trudeau's politicians claim that families will be better off with this carbon tax and rebate scheme. But come on, I mean, if you think that the carbon tax, the government is going to raise taxes, skim some off the top, and then make everyone better off, well, then we've got some Ocean View property in Regina to sell you. But hold on a second, because the parliamentary budget officer shows that the government's claims have been incorrect. And in fact, in 2023, the carbon tax will cost the average family anywhere between $402 all the way up to $847, even after the rebates.
And on top of that, we know the CTF is highlighting clean fuel regulations as a second carbon tax. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that's going to impact industry and consumers.
So here's how it works. If producers can't meet the government's requirements, they're going to have to pay the second carbon tax. But economists and the government's own number crunchers show that the costs are really going to be felt by all of us when we're fueling up at the pumps. In fact, the government's numbers suggest that the second carbon tax could increase the price of gasoline by up to 13 cents by 2030. And the government's own analysis shows who's really going to feel the pinch the most from the second carbon tax: lower and middle income Canadians who are already struggling with energy poverty, like single mothers and the seniors who are living on fixed incomes.
All right, Mr. Terrazzano, a little over a minute left here, but we're talking a lot about tax increases. What are some instances of tax relief across Canada, federally and provincially, especially when compared to other peer countries?
Well, you've got Alberta that is ending bracket creep. It's also suspending gas taxes. Ontario providing gas tax relief. You got New Brunswick providing significant income tax relief up to $1,300. But we have to also talk about the payroll tax hikes from the federal government. In 2023, if you're making $67,000 or more, you're going to be paying about 300 extra bucks because of the payroll tax hikes, but even that downplays the total bill. In 2023, through the payroll tax, a worker making $67,000 or more will pay about 4,700 bucks in payroll taxes in 2023.
Lots to consider, Mr. Terrazzano. And if anyone wants more information, they can visit the CTF's website. Again, Mr. Terrazzano, we appreciate your time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back. And after the break, we're going to take a look at the major news stories and headlines from around the world. Ukraine's president visits a city that's experiencing intense fighting. Sweden's NATO bid is facing headwinds amid Turkey's disappointment over an extradition refusal. And thousands of nurses walk off the job in the United Kingdom. We'll have these stories and more news from around the world after the break, so stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the city of Bakhmut, which has been the recent focus of some of the most intense fighting of Russia's war. The president's office in Kyiv said today that the eastern Ukrainian city is the scene of fierce battles between Ukraine's defenders and Russia's invading forces. It said Mr. Zelensky met with military personnel. All right, well, meanwhile, Turkey's foreign minister has called the refusal of Sweden's top court to extradite a man wanted by Turkey a very negative development. His comments come as Ankara continues to delay Sweden's and Finland's membership in NATO. Speaking Tuesday, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said Turkey's request for the extradition of Bülent Kenyas was rejected. This despite a memorandum signed by Turkey, Sweden, and Finland. The 55-year-old was granted asylum in Sweden. He was a former editor of the English-language Today's Zaman newspaper, which was owned by the network linked to Muslim cleric Fethullah Gulen. Turkey blames the cleric for a failed coup in 2016 and considers the network to be a terror organization. Turning to the UK now, where thousands of nurses walked off the job today in their second 24-hour strike this morning. Ambulance drivers, paramedics, and dispatchers are set to strike tomorrow and again on the 28th. This is in response to a cost of living crisis driven by soaring food and energy prices. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservative government is rejecting pressure to offer more money to the workers. This comes as the strikes put added strain on an already overstretched healthcare system. A German court has convicted a 97-year-old woman of being an accessory to murder. This for her role as a secretary to the SS commander of the Nazi Stutthof concentration camp during the Second World War. The defendant was found to have known about and deliberately supported the killing of more than 10,500 prisoners. German news agency DPA reports that a state court today gave the woman a 2-year suspended sentence. South of our border, the January 6th House Committee voted to recommend criminal charges against Donald Trump yesterday. While the Republican Party rallied behind the former president, few spoke in his defense yesterday. This comes after federal agents seized classified documents from his Florida estate this summer. Mr. Trump predicts the criminal referral will ultimately help him. He posted on his social network that people who love freedom will rally around him as he makes another run for the presidency in 2024. All right, staying in the U.S., where jurors in Los Angeles returned from 9 days of deliberation to find Harvey Weinstein guilty of rape at his second sexual misconduct trial. Last night's verdicts following a month-long trial represent a victory for the Me Too movement. This comes 5 years after the former movie mogul became the central figure of it. The 70-year-old was convicted of 3 counts in the case of one of the 4 accusers he faced in LA. She was an Italian actor and model known at the trial as Jane Doe 1. Mr. Weinstein is already serving a 23-year sentence for a rape and sexual assault conviction in New York. All right, turning to moves by the Bank of Japan, which broadened caps for a benchmark government bond yield. This is a surprise move that pushed bond yields higher globally and dinged Asian stocks. The central bank on Tuesday said that it would allow the yield curve on the 10-year Japanese government bond to range 50 basis points either side of its 0% target. Now, this is up from the previous cap of 25 basis points. All right, well, meanwhile, the Bank of England has unveiled banknotes with a portrait of King Charles on them. His face will grace 5, 10, 20, and 50-pound notes from mid-2024. 50-pence coins bearing King Charles's image have already entered circulation via post offices across the United Kingdom. All right, to the red planet now, where it could be the end of the red dusty line for NASA's InSight lander on Mars. Power levels have been dwindling for months on the lander, and controllers say the spacecraft has now fallen silent after 4 years on Mars. They are blaming the red dust that has coated inside solar panels. The probe landed on Mars in 2018 and was the first spacecraft to document a Marsquake. It eventually recorded more than 1,300 of them. And it was a day of celebration in Argentina today. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez declared Tuesday a national holiday so everyone could celebrate the country's World Cup victory. Thousands of fans lined up in the middle of the night to try to get a glimpse of the team getting off a plane. All the players were welcomed with fireworks. People celebrated today with a massive street party at the Obelisk, an iconic Buenos Aires landmark. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily.